Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel, The Bishop's Interview. I am Nathan Hinckley, also known as Bishop Hinckley, and I want to truly and sincerely thank you for the support that my channel has received, and I hope you find this episode beneficial. This is the part of the show that I not only thank you, but also shame you if you haven't liked and subscribed and did all that stuff. Looks like I get a lot more views than I have subscribers, so that would be really great if you guys could do that. So the topic today is I'd like to share the T on the JST, and don't ask why I have a picture of Kermit the Frog, but I do. And so here's the T on the JST. So Mormons believe in the Holy Bible. If you ask any Mormon, they will say, "Oh yeah, that we treat that as scripture, and we believe it's scripture, just like the Book of Mormon or whatever." But if you ask just a couple questions, you'll always hear the qualifier of as far as it is translated correctly. And by that, Mormons mean, and they suggest that there are many things in the Bible that are not translated correctly, or at least weren't. And so the question would be, well, what things are not translated correctly, and who gets to decide that? Well, in Joseph Smith's day, it was him that would decide what was correct and what was not. And actually, he had told that there were many plain and precious truths that had been lost in the Bible, whether it was from centuries or generations of translations, or whatever the case may be, that there were just things lost. Maybe it was just human error, or maybe it was evil men that were trying to thwart the Lord's true and precious work, and we'll get into that in just a second. So Joseph had taught that there's many plain and precious truths that had been lost from the Bible, and that's kind of why Mormons are so adamant about teaching and preaching of the Book of Mormon, because we say that it is the most correct book on earth. And the reason why we say that is because it has not went through generations of being passed down from either by mouth or going through different translation processes, that it is a pure book. And so Joseph had said that it is actually the most correct book on earth. And and actually it would be, if the story is correct and is honest and truthful. It would have been written down on golden plates by prophets in America, and all put together by Mormon. Mormon gave the plates, the gold plates, actually, to his son Moroni, who wrote a couple things, and then he was, running from the bad guys. Every story needs some bad guys, and then he dug a hole and he buried the plates where they sat for about 2,000 years. And so Joseph was led to this place and takes the plates out of the ground and just simply translates them from a language he can't read into English. So therefore, it would be the most correct book, having not gone through all the other translations. So I have here what we call a quad, or it's it's the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. So within those books, we will see what we call the Joseph Smith translation. And I had just pulled out my set of scriptures from my mission. And as a matter of fact, you probably can't see this, but it's thoroughly, thoroughly marked and notes and cross references and underlines and impressions and all the things. So, anyways, the Joseph Smith translation was Joseph Smith's attempt at correcting and restoring these plain and precious truths that were lost in the Bible. Now, Mormons will say that Joseph never deemed this project complete. I believe our breakoff church, I believe they do consider it a complete work. But at any rate, we have the Joseph Smith translation. It's in our scriptures. And the really smart and in tune people, when you're at church, they'll say, well, whoa, 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 we have to read the JST. And so that's what it's called, the JST, commonly referred to. JS obviously would be Joseph Smith, and T would be translation. And it's funny because at the end of this, we'll show how some people are moving away from calling it a translation. But indeed, that is what the T stands for. It stands for translation. So if we go to the Joseph Smith translation of the King James version of the Bible, there's lots of different corrections and additions, and a lot of them make total sense, that they're just clarifying things. Some of them just give a little bit deeper sense to what's being said. It's obviously just standard stuff. That's pretty great. No real big problem with the majority of it. However, when we get to Genesis, the King James version of the Bible only goes to verse 26. Well, in the JST, Joseph added 12 verses. So for some reason, at some point in time, some meaniehead saw those 12 verses and they took them out, I guess. And so Joseph was restoring them. So interestingly, if we look a little bit about, well, what was in those 12 verses, lo and behold, Joseph Smith's name was actually mentioned in them. And that's such a miracle that all of these years from back in, the time when Genesis was written, that he was actually foretold. And so Joseph restored this to the Bible, to Genesis. And in verse 33, of course, of the JST, it says, and that seer will I bless, and they that seek to destroy him shall be confounded. For this promise I give unto you, for I will remember you from generation to generation, and his name shall be called Joseph, and it shall be after the name of his father. And he shall be like unto you, for the thing which the Lord shall bring forth by his hand shall bring my people unto salvation. So as a little backstory, this is actually speaking to Joseph, speaking about Joseph of Egypt, and it's speaking to Moses, likening him to Moses. And the most important part of that is he mentions Joseph, but not only Joseph, his father Joseph. So we have two people being foretold thousands of years before they would come. But for some reason, some guy along the way took these out, I guess, and Joseph restored them. So, I remember on my mission, we would be teaching of Joseph Smith, and someone would say, well, is he mentioned in the Bible? And I would be thinking to myself, actually, he is. But somebody took his name out. Of course, we rarely would mention that, I guess, because it sounded a little silly. However, it never occurred to me at the time that that was silly. So, strangely, not only was Joseph Smith foretold and prophesied of in the Bible, but he also showed up in the Book of Mormon. And not only did he show up in the Book of Mormon, but his dad did too. In 2nd Nephi, verse 3, 14 and 15, we read these mentions. It says, Yea, Joseph truly said, Thus saith the Lord unto me, a choice seer will I raise up out of the fruit of thy loins. This would be Joseph of Egypt. And he shall be great like unto Moses. Behold, that seer will the Lord bless, and they that seek to destroy him shall be confounded. Are we starting to see maybe the same person perhaps could have written both of these? And his name shall be called after me, and it shall be after the name of his father. And he shall be like unto me, for the thing which the Lord shall bring forth by his hands by the power of the Lord shall bring my people unto salvation. There it is. There is the proof that Joseph Smith was prophesied of, was foretold by ancient prophets, both in America and in the old world found in the Bible. That is absolute proof. Alternatively, could it be that Joseph just simply wrote himself into both the Book of Mormon and the Bible? You know, as we sit with that and just ponder that and ponder the fact that two different prophets on two different continents in two different times, knowing nothing of each other, would be prophesying of this event and using the same words and same terminology, and that it just so happens to be prophesying of the guy and his dad that brings this stuff forth. Pretty suspicious. So there's just one problem when talking about this Joseph Smith translation, and that how it was restoring plain and precious truths, that it was revelation to Joseph's mind. And that problem is that in a study published in 2017 at BYU, among places, and credit to Haley Wilson, this was shown that the JST, and I'll use this word super loosely, was borrowed heavily from Methodist theologian Adam Clarke from his famous Bible commentary. And they found in this study that there were direct parallels between Smith's translation and Adam Clarke's biblical commentary, and that they are simply too numerous and explicit to posit happenstance or coincidental overlap. In other words, our own church, basically through BYU, has now acknowledged that the JST is not inspired, revelation to Joseph Smith. In fact, it is plagiarism. That it is that there are direct parallels, simply too numerous to posit as happenstance or coincidental overlap. They're a little generous, and this comes from Wikipedia. I had a couple of people say, "Oh, he didn't show his sources." Go to Wikipedia; it's easy to find. Look up the JST, Joseph Smith translation. But the word borrowed is awfully generous, I believe. So, of course, the majority of the JST comes directly from Adam Clarke. However, Adam Clarke mentioned nothing of these verses that were added or that Joseph added, referring to himself and his dad in Genesis. This might give a little bit of reason why we see people like Brad Wilcox, who is in our leadership in the young men presidency currently on the Keystone podcast just this year, saying, when Joseph Smith did the translation of the Bible, which wasn't necessarily a translation, it was more of an inspired commentary. You think? Yeah, it definitely was not an inspired translation. You know, it was a commentary that he based almost entirely off of someone else's work until the time that he wanted to insert his own name into the Bible. These truths were really hard for me. They were hard to sit with. It was embarrassing that I spent so much time marking up my scriptures and preaching these things and having people even say, well, is his name in the Bible? And thinking to myself, yeah, it is, but someone took it out. But it never occurred to me, could it be that Joseph just wrote himself in? And I know that is not a friendly, thought for faithful Mormons, but it is the most logical and reasonable explanation for why Joseph and his dad show up in the Book of Mormon and in the Bible. And that is my T on the JST.